Okay, well, I think probably the question on everybody's lips at the moment is, what does this look like in Australian schools? And so that's what the next session aims to achieve, to give you some snapshots of good STEM practice happening in Australian schools. Now, we do have 4 presentations. We're going to have 2 of them, then break for morning tea for around 15 minutes. At the end of the 4 presentations, we're going to have time in your rooms. We're going to bring one of the presenters into each room virtually and have time for some questions and comments and discussion about the work that they're doing. So if you have some questions as you listen to the presentations, please jot them down. And then in the question Q&A part of this, you'll have a chance to ask those questions if you've got the right person in the room, and we can share information across rooms at lunchtime perhaps. Noting again that all PowerPoints will become available to you. Okay, so let's get started in what STEM looks like in Australian schools. I want to introduce Kirsty Costa. Kirsty actually has one of the most fantastic jobs in the world. She's Head of Education Innovation at Melbourne Zoo. And at Melbourne Zoo, around about 150,000 school students visit for education programs each year. And the zoo is leading global work in species conservation. In fact, the zoo has a long-term partnership with Port Moresby Nature Park. And together, for the PNGAus Partnerships Program, they've developed an online professional learning course for past teachers on the theme of STEM and the environment. And that's going to be available in the next couple of weeks. So Kirsty's kindly agreed today to brief us on what using the environment to teach STEM looks like in Australian schools. So over to you, Kirsty. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath, and hello, everyone. Hello from Melbourne. We've just had a wild and woolly weather night, but thankfully I have electricity, so I'm really excited that I can come to you today. Just to give you a little bit of background while I'm sharing my screen, I'll just, and if you could just let me know, Kath, by giving me a head nod whether or not you can see this screen okay. I'll just quickly pop it up. Can you see that in presentation mode, or can you see it in the right mode? I'm still getting to know this Zoom situation.
No, I think you're good, Kirsty.
Right, fantastic. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about STEM and the environment, and just to give you a background about who I am. So I have been working in education for 20 years. I've been a classroom teacher in a school. I've worked in education providers like Zoos Victoria, and I've also run my own education consultancy. And during that time, I've seen education change a lot in Australia's schools, and I'm going to share a little bit about how education has changed at Zoos Victoria. So in my role, I oversee education innovation across our 3 zoos, Melbourne Zoo, Healesville Sanctuary and Werribee Zoo, and I also lead our teacher professional learning programs as well. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about Zoos Victoria so you'll understand where I'm coming from in the context of how STEM works in our environment. I'm going to talk and sort of peel back the curtain a little bit on learning design to tell you how we design our STEM programs. Then I'm going to actually give you an example of a STEM program, which is around one of our special endangered frogs. And then I'm going to briefly talk about that STEM and environment partnership that Kath mentioned before. So a little bit about Zoos Victoria is that we're a world-leading conservation-based zoo. So that means that we exist for animal conservation, not for entertainment. And we also are not-for-profit, so we don't exist for money. And we have 3 properties of zoos around Melbourne, one in the middle of the city in Melbourne, one out in the western suburbs of Melbourne, and one out in the more forest area of the eastern part of Melbourne. And as part of what Zoos Victoria does is we run breeding programs for endangered animals. We also have a team of people who go out and care for injured animals in the wild. This is our marine rescue unit who go out and look at, who care for animals who are in marine areas, so oceans and rivers. We also do a lot of scientific research out in the wild with a whole lot of scientists at the zoo. We work with communities on campaigns and also conservation projects. And we also have global partnerships. As Kath mentioned before, our relationship with sister zoos like the Port Moresby Nature Park, and we also support really important conservation projects like this one. This is the gorilla doctors in Africa. We have 5,000 teachers who are members of Zoos Victoria, and we offer them a range of professional learning to help them with all different sorts of things in their classroom. And as Kath mentioned before, we see about 150,000 people through our gates every year. So we educate a lot of kids every year, from kindergarten, so 4 to 5-year-olds, all the way through to the end of their schooling. We also provide tertiary programs too, so we support university students as well. So just to give you a bit of an insight, this is what our classroom looked like 50 years ago at Melbourne Zoo. So education's been going on a long time at the zoo. And it was basically a room with no windows, a slide projector at the front and a whole lot of posters. And it was a scientific lecture, basically 50 years ago. And then as the education evolved in our zoos, it sort of evolved alongside what was happening in classrooms in Australia. This picture's from the 1970s. And there was a lot of scientists in white lab coats holding animals. That's sort of where it evolved to. And then these days, to align with the sort of movement that's happening not only in Australia but overseas in how we want to educate young people, we now do a lot more hands-on discovery. So it's not a lot of standing up the front and sharing facts. And also we want to position students as experts. So we really focus in on how we can get students to become the experts and not be so reliant upon other people to get the information and the skills that they need. So we put them in the centre of the learning. A person who really changed the way that we thought about education and especially how we think about STEM, and it sounds like that this person relates a lot to what Rob was presenting before, was Joanne Vasquez. And there's a link to in this presentation that you can have access to if you want to go and see her work. I'd say that she was one of the initial thinkers about STEM, and she came out of New York. And so she, through her research, was able to define STEM as being part of a plane of integration. So traditionally, we've all done disciplinary learning, which is where students are learning concepts and skills in the same subject area. So if you're in high school, you know, you're going off to your maths class, you're going to your science class, you're going to your English class. Then she talked about the evolution from disciplinary is interdisciplinary, which is where students are learning 2 or more concepts or skills in different subject areas at the same time. Often there'd be like a theme. And I've seen this before in Australian schools where, say, the science teacher and the maths teacher in a secondary school will get together and say, let's teach astronomy and space. I'll do the science of it, you do the maths of it. So that's an example of interdisciplinary where you're starting to blend your disciplines together. And the students might be learning that at the same time, or they might be learning it separately and have a theme that ties it together. Where the zoo really wants to play and where teachers have told us in Australia that they want to go is what's called transdisciplinary STEM, which is where students are mashing 2 bits of knowledge and skills together. And then at the heart of that is that real world problem or real world project. So we realised pretty quickly at the zoo that that's where we wanted to be and that's what we could offer. But we also wanted to acknowledge, a lot like probably what's happening in Papua New Guinea, that schools were anywhere on that plane of STEM integration, from still teaching disciplinary through to teaching in a transdisciplinary space. So that's been a really good challenge for us on how we can support teachers no matter where they are to try and move them a little bit closer up towards transdisciplinary. And the reason that we do that is, and Rob might have referred to it before, there is so much research coming out to say that transdisciplinary space is where the really good learning happens that gives students the skills for life. So that's what we've been really focusing on with our work as well. We also did a whole lot of teacher research with 2 different universities in Melbourne, and they found it kind of aligned with what we could see happening in schools with that different STEM of plain STEM integration, was also teacher confidence. So some teachers were really not confident with being able to mash and combine 2 subject areas together, while others were feeling really confident. And so those not confident teachers, they said that they needed lots and lots of help with teaching STEM, and they were really worried about the impact that mashing STEM together was going to have on their teaching and their students. In particular, there was a concern around that if you taught science and maths or science and design at the same time, that you would be minimising the learning that could happen for both of those disciplines. So that was really good for us to know. Then the teachers who were really confident, they could, once they had built up their confidence, could see lots of opportunities to include STEM in their classes, and they kind of could take it and run with it the way that they wanted to. And they were really excited about STEM. So as a metaphor for how we could see this, some teachers needed a cookbook. So they needed all of the recipes and all of the instructions in how to cook up STEM in their classroom, while other teachers, they just needed to look at the recipe, then they got the idea, and then they would kind of throw in all the ingredients and cook up the STEM themselves. So that was our challenge, which I'm sure would be a challenge in Papua New Guinea as it is everywhere. Interestingly, as part of our research, all teachers did indicate that they wanted to start to remove those barriers around the different subject areas. And there were 3 different things that came out in the research that actually aligns with all of the global research that Joanne Vasquez has done as well. And those 3 keywords were real world, rigorous, and relevant. So real world was, teachers said to us that they wanted something that they could relate and answer the question that students always ask us, which is, why are we learning this? Then rigorous was around having the right step-by-step instructions, the right assessment tools, and that very closely linked relationship to the curriculum. And then relevant is that while it's really important to learn about animals or anything else outside of your space, the more that students can relate to their daily lives, the better. So that's been the guiding light for us, those 3 words. Don't you love it in education? There's always a catchphrase for everything. Everyone's got their own words that they use. Ours are real world, rigorous, and relevant. That's how we now measure our educational standard at Zoos Victoria. So how do we play in that transdisciplinary space, knowing what we knew about research? Well, for the last 5 years, we've trialled 10 different programs. They've all been to paying customers, which has been a good trial for us in terms of we get that really important and honest evaluation, and we've seen thousands of students. It's actually been a bit of a surprise. We thought that at first that our programs would go really slowly because we thought maybe we'd only be talking to those confident teachers, but the appetite for teachers to be able to do these programs has surprised me. So it's been really impressive how many people wanted to come and participate and try it and give it a go. The way that we design our STEM programs is we use science as an anchor, but you could use design and technologies and ICT as an anchor, or you could use physics as an anchor, whatever anchor you would like. But we've found for us, finding one anchor to then build the rest of the STEM program has been really valuable. So we anchor our STEM programs in science because we're a science-based organisation. And then we look at the opportunities on how to build the value around the project with design and with technologies and with mathematics. Also, obviously, there's opportunities in those general capabilities that Rob was talking about before, like critical thinking, creative thinking, ethical understanding, intercultural understanding. You can build them out too. But we got a bit overwhelmed at first trying to cook our STEM recipe. And so finding a grounding was really valuable. We also work backwards like good teachers do. So first we looked at what are the curriculum outcomes. Then that really big question is like, how will students actually use what they've learned in a real way? And how can we as a zoo help that? What skills and knowledge are they going to learn? And then how do we spark that love of learning at the start of it all to get them really into it? So that's how we plan and design. And what we know that we can offer is real people. So zookeepers, zoo scientists, people who are working in STEM. And also we can offer real problems because working in wildlife and working with animals and working in a zoo has lots of big problems. So that's where we knew that we could offer that up. And we know lots of other organisations like the zoo who are doing the same, and schools are really excited about that because teachers don't then need to always go out and find all this stuff. They can just partner with someone and get what they need. We have a simple educational framework called Connect, Understand and Act, and this is basic teaching. We all know it, right? So first you engage the learners, then you're all about that repeated practice to get the knowledge and skills that students need that shifts it from short-term memory to long-term memory. And then for us, that ACT part is around how do they take what they've learned and consolidate it in a real way. And this is, of course, not rocket science, because if you did inquiry learning or integrated learning or design thinking, you know, they're kind of the umbrella overall pictures of how we design learning. So that's our learning design with STEM. And so I thought I'd give you a real example. And so this is one of our STEM programs. So I'm going to walk you through how we've designed it. At the moment, we've got 3 different STEM programs that are being offered at each of our properties. One focuses around sustainability and energy, in particular electricity and renewable energy. We have one where students are focusing in on zoo habitats for animals. That's been a really popular program because they get to go and visit the hippos at Werribee Zoo and everyone loves a hippo. So that's been one where they look at the habitat of the animal and use their science and their design and their maths knowledge to actually redesign the habitat. And that's a real problem and something that we're always looking at in our zoos. And then the one that we've been focusing on, that we've then built out our partnership with Port Moresby Nature Park and the PASS program, is STEM for Endangered Animals, which is part of our Love Your Locals or Love Your Local Animal program. So friends, I'd like to introduce you to the bawbaw frog. You'd say that this bawbaw frog was not born with a lot of beauty. It's not a very popular frog. It's not as beautiful as some of our other frogs. It lives up at Mount Bawbaw, which is a large mountain just near Melbourne, and it's the only place in the world where this frog is found. And Mount Bawbaw is really popular as a place for Melburnians to go and snowboard and ski and toboggan. So it's got a mountain with a lot of people. And then lower down on the mountain are these really thick tropical rainforests, and that's where the bawbaw frog lives. So it doesn't live up in the snow, it just lives a little bit further down the mountain. This is what the bawbaw frog looks like. As I said, it's, you know, not a pretty frog. It's not as pretty as, say, the corroboree frog, which is a very popular frog in Australia. And it also often has really brown, mucky colours. So how do we get young people connecting with this frog when we could be dangling a hippo in front of them? It's been a very good challenge for us and how we use STEM in that way. The sad story around this frog is that there is less than 1,000 left in the wild. And so Zoos Victoria has been doing a breeding program. That's how small they are. That makes them a little bit cuter, doesn't it? So we've been doing a breeding program with these frogs and releasing them out in the wild. And also we've been doing a lot of research in the wild with our partners to figure out what's affecting the frog's survival, how many there are out there, what is the habitat and the environment like. And chytrid fungus, which is a very well-known fungus that's affecting a lot of frogs in the world, including Papua New Guinea, that's the fungus that's affecting the survival of this frog. What we found out through all of our research is that people falling in love with our endangered animals is really important. It helps to do with political decisions around the frogs. It helps people with funding projects, and also it creates that connection to community when they go up to the mountain to maybe be a little bit more respectful of the environment. When we looked at the map, we found out there were 15 schools all within half an hour drive of Mount Bawbaw, and that's where we started our program. So as part of this program, what we've learned, because you remember how I showed you that STEM of plain integration and confidence and not confidence with STEM, was that teaching resources, and we all know this, are crucial to the success of a program. So first of all, we worked with our scientists and our curriculum writers, because everyone who's a teacher in the zoo is a practicing teacher. And we created a teaching guide filled with activities that was mapped to the curriculum. We also created a student workbook so that teachers could pull something out if they needed to guide their students through the process. And we also built up a whole lot of videos, because videos are a very popular resource in Australian schools at the moment. And those videos were scientific observation videos, interviews with scientists, and funny facts and things that are going to engage students. We also ran a whole lot of professional development, which we continue to do around STEM, and we aligned this up with our different programs, including one that we've now got on marine animals as well. And at the heartbeat of all of our STEM programs is a design brief. So this design brief can be given from teacher to student, and also we make all of our documents Word documents so teachers can edit their student workbooks and make them the way they'd like. And this design brief needed to have a big problem at the heart of it, and also a person that students knew that they were designing for. So this is where we start to bring in that real world element. We use the design thinking process to then guide teachers and students through this program. So the first thing that we wanted to do was connect them to the frog, get to know the frog, and also get to know the user. So we created lots of resources so they could connect with Dion, who's the guy on the right. And Dion is like one of the best frog experts in Australia and very passionate about the bawbaw frog. So first they got to know him, and then they got to come to the zoo, or they got to watch lots of videos to get to know the bawbaw frog. Once we had that heart connection and students were feeling interested and curious, then we move into the understand phase of design thinking and STEM. So this is where students are doing lots of research. They're starting to apply their different skills and knowledge in different learning areas, and they're starting to, in their own words, define what the big problem is. So as part of the science, well, the science of animals is obvious. I'm really familiar with the old Papua New Guinea syllabus, and I know that there is lots of animals and adaptations and classification and features and life cycles. So the science is really clear for this program. The maths was really interesting. So students could look at graphs of frog populations And the map on the right is where frogs have been found and plotted on a map. So there starts to bring in the maths there as well. Then also we brought in the technology. So for example, Zoos Victoria is trialling these teeny tiny little trackers that you can see on the back of the frog. And those trackers actually have been used to do satellite and GPS mapping of some of our frogs. So they got to know some of the role that technology has in animals and wildlife and the environment. And then through that, they started to ideate their ideas, like what do we want to try? How are we going to get people to fall in love with frogs? What's our big idea that we could have a go at? And then through the act, that's where they start to trial their ideas. So I'm just going to give you one example. This is Grey Street Primary School, who was right near the mountain. And you can see those happy smiling kids who were really into their learning. They came up with lots of different ways for their community to fall in love with the bawball frog. First of all, they put signs up all around their town. So they're in Terralga, which is a town of about 5,000, 10,000 people. And so they put up lots of signs around to educate. And you can see the literacy and the maths and the geography that's included just in this sign. They're expressing their learning, but it was real. Their learning was visible and was being able to be seen by people in their community. They ran a big frog festival where they had over 500 people come to their school. They sold frog magnets, you can see on the left, and they also sold frog treats like frog cookies and frog chocolate, frog fudge. And through all of that, they also did a T-shirt fundraiser. So you can see all the students and the teachers wearing their Save the Bawball Frog fundraiser. That T-shirt, the students had to calculate what was going to be the cost, how much were they going to sell it for, how many would they need to buy, what were the different sizes. So they did all the maths around that. And they were able to raise over $5,000 as well. So they decided they'd do it as a fundraiser. The feedback from the principal has been amazing in this program. So we did a lot of evaluation through all the schools who participated. I think that what this bit jumped out as me, that she said that she's never seen a level of engagement and learning and delight. I love that word, delight, and how involved students were. And also she said that some teachers in her school were starting to feel like they needed to leave. And this program, she thinks, kept them there because it kept teaching interesting for them. The students, well, it was a real range, but one of the students said that I never really cared about science, and now I know how to solve animal problems. So I thought that was pretty cute. That was from a grade 5 student. And then the teacher feedback was interesting, right? Because this school had the confident to not confident scale in their school. And what they saw, what got them on board was the change in their students. So students who were normally quiet spoke up, and also students became more independent in their learning. So they started to see the value. So we could have spent hours and hours telling them how valuable this program is, but we've learned that the only way they learn is by seeing it, doing it, and experiencing it to know it. So in the schools that participated, we actually saw a 15 to 25% increase in one term, which was 8 weeks of work. So I was really happy with that in such a short time, that teachers' confidence in STEM had improved. And from that, we've seen all sorts of teachers and students take the concepts of how you mash together different skills and knowledge, how you design learning, and how you build out resources to do all sorts of solving of problems. So we've seen animal puppets being designed for different endangered animals. We've seen students come up with all sorts of amazing ideas for zoo habitats. And also we've had them think about how they can redesign wild habitats, habitats that are shared with people, habitats in national parks. And the most exciting part as part of this, which I noticed Rob mentioned before, is that you get to a point with students where you don't need to put a problem on the table, but they're confident enough to go out and find the problems themselves. So we have found as part of that scale that sometimes putting the problem on the table first and them understanding design thinking and how to combine everything, you do that first. And then as they don't need the cookbook anymore and they're writing their own recipes, that's when you can start to really do the problem finding. So off the back of all of that, so 5 years of work, we've been really excited to partner with the PASS program and the Port Moresby Nature Park to create STEM in the environment for Papua New Guinea schools and teachers. So we've taken everything that we've learnt about STEM education, and we have a educator exchange program between Port Moresby and Melbourne. So their zoo teachers come over to us and we send our teachers over to them. So we've combined all of that cultural understanding as well to create this program. And it's based on the concept that as humans, we are actually animals who need to use our senses, move our bodies, and behave in natural ways in order to have a good quality life. And the same rule needs to be applied to animals. So students are going to study the science, the maths, the design and technology around how you care for tree kangaroos at Port Moresby and how you care for blue-eyed cockatoos. And we do find with programs like this that giving students at least 2 choices is really important so they can choose an animal that resonates with them. We're going to use exactly the same learning design elements as I've just mentioned. So we do a transdisciplinary STEM program with this that is anchored in science. We use Connect, Understand and Act and Design Thinking. We've got the Teacher Professional Learning, which is the self-guided course, which goes for 1 hour, that builds up that teacher confidence and gets their head wrapped around it. And also we've got those teaching resources that we know are so important that include that step-by-step instruction as well as the student workbook. So we've put together that package based on what we've learnt, and we're really excited to launch it. And as I said to you before, we've come back to those 3 things again. We know that we will have success if that program is real world, if it's rigorous and it's relevant. So that's what we've been really focusing in on through the STEM programs. So that's sort of what I wanted to give you as a bit of a background. I just wanted to thank you all for everything that you're doing to provide education to young people. I know that it is a hard job. I'm really grateful that you're all here and that I've had the opportunity to connect with you. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Kirsty. What a terrific presentation, and to do that example, to deep dive into the example of the frog and show us the way that the STEM learning occurs was just terrific. Kirsty, I think you're going to be joining the room in Port Moresby that has biology and technology teachers.
Right.
So that room will have a chance to talk to you for around about 15 minutes at the end of this session after morning tea. So thanks very much, Kirsty, and we'll see you back at that time. Thank you.